So, all right, here we go. Hey, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. For those who don't know, I'm Teddy, and the guy in the bright red shirt is Randy, and we'll tell you about our special guest in a few minutes. Hey, Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy is sponsored by Blackwell Captive Solutions. Is your health care plan your biggest spend in your business? Do you want more power and greater transparency with your health plan? Blackwell Captive Solutions equalizes the playing field so that your cost is not based on the insurance company and what they think they can charge. Rather, Blackwell Captive Solutions allows you to track every dollar. For greater price transparency on your insurance, call Blackwell Captive Solutions. Randy, you doing all right, man? Let me tell the audience who I am while you finish up. Again, I'm Teddy Burriss. I work for a company called Burriss Consulting. It means I work for my wife. And we run a business where we teach LinkedIn as a business tool. We teach Google Workspaces business tools. We do one-on-one coaching, corporate training programs, public speaking. We'll show up on any podcast. And Abby, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I walk around wearing a sandwich board telling people what LinkedIn's all about. So, but that's who I am. Randy, are you good to go?
Yeah, I think we're firing on all cylinders here, Teddy. So that's a good thing. I like that. I like it. Hey, Randy Wooden with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, based in Winston-Salem, operating from my spacious, luxurious studio, Teddy, that I've been at for I don't know how many years
Randy,
now.
did we fund that or is it self-funded?
I funded that. You know,
okay, just checking. Just
big dollar guy. Hey, you know what? New year, new job, new life, new this, new that. If you're in a job search or you may know somebody who is or thinking about it, have them reach out to me. I've got clients across the country, but predominantly here in the Triad. Happy to help you if you're a professional and think it's time for that change. Let's talk about it. And our services are free, so always ready to try to help and add value where we can. But every Wednesday, take time out during lunchtime, and Teddy and I get together and have a little fun. We have Abby Donnelly back on. Abby, you were with us a year or two ago. That's and and I know you're working on a book. We'll get into that, but I'll introduce Abby briefly and kind of talk about some of the topics that we'll cover today. We invite you, if you're watching us live, to type in the chat. Teddy, you'll keep an eye on that if you have questions or comments for Abby. We'll try to work those in where we can. But today we're going to talk about succession planning. And, certainly if you're a business owner or you're in the C-suite, there's that. But what about if you're a mid-level manager, senior manager? I mean, creating bench strength, creating that funnel. So for you to be promoted, you've got internal opportunities for others in the company that are groomed and ready to ascend to that next level. So we'll talk about that. We'll try to unpack a lot of the components of that today and have a little fun too. Abby's just a hoot and just love talking to her. So we're going to dive into that. Abby, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more thoroughly than I just did?
Sure. I'm happy to do that. So I'm Abby Donnelly. I started the Leadership and Legacy Group about 11 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the primary things that I do, because we is I, the primary things that I do is I work with business owners, helping them develop their successors so that they're prepared to take over and run the company both profitably and sustainably, so that the owner can get freed up and move on into their next chapter. And then I also work with folks that are looking at what their next chapter might entail. And so they're looking to create a next chapter that is meaningful and rewarding, whether they are working for pay or not. They want to incorporate in something more substantial than maybe traveling more, playing a lot of golf, and spending more time with family, which are the typical things people say that they want to do.
Yeah, sure. Well, so a lot to talk about today. Before we dive into the conversation, I always ask the why question. You're passionate about what you do. You've been doing it for some time now. What drives you?
Well, it's a great question because I am very mission driven, and I think that this work speaks to me. So what has got me excited about it is the opportunity to develop leaders. And when you can work with somebody and see their potential and see them grow into a higher level role and take on more responsibility, for me, that's very rewarding. And then also I have worked really hard over the years to plan my best life and to do work that is meaningful and rewarding to me. And so I've taken a lot of the process and tools that I've used and built them into a methodology that I love using with other people to help them do the same thing. So it kind of comes really nicely together with succession and exit.
Yeah. And I know you're involved on some boards, right? So you do more than, kind of talk the talk, you walk the walk. And so you're involved in a number of things. So again, really admire Abby. I've known you for probably 20 years or so. So awesome. Good stuff. Well, let's get started. Again, if you've got questions or comments for Abby, put them in the chat. Teddy will keep an eye on that. He's highly paid and highly skilled. Or so he says. So we're at the ready with that. But let's dive in. You mentioned something about succession planning not being just for the C-suite, and you want to talk about. And I think it's a chapter in this upcoming book that you'll have coming out called Daisy Chain Development. So first, what is that? Let's define it, and then let's talk more in detail about it.
Yeah, I think typically we think about succession planning as the C-suite. It's the business owner, CEO, president that's going to be exiting, and you've got a succession plan in their replacement.
Yeah.
Really, succession planning is much broader than that, because any role in the organization needs a successor if there's functional work that needs to be done. And so the daisy chain development, it really comes from the concept that if you're moving someone that's on the leadership team into the president or CEO role, that opens up a gap. And then that next person needs to be promoted into or expand their responsibility to close that gap. And then that probably creates another gap. And it's kind of like dominoes, but I call it daisy chain. And you have to develop people at every level of the organization to continue to grow the organization and to grow the people.
Yeah, so that's it in an overview. So the devil's in the details, though, and that's what we're going to dive into today. Teddy, anything in the chat area you want to work in? Teddy's so thrilled.
Our audience, if you have any questions, any ideas about this conversation, please use the chat and drop in, and I'll share it with Abby and Randy. Abby, a thought, and maybe you guys are going to talk about that. How good are most companies today managing that daisy chain?
Well, I don't think most companies really give it a lot of thought. That they understand that there are going to be gaps in the organization, but I think it's difficult to continue to be thinking multiple years down the road, which is really what it takes to do a good job of succession planning and daisy chain development. There are some companies out there that do a really nice job of developing their people. And some of them are very intentional about the daisy chain, but some of them are just good at developing their people. They've incorporated into the culture, and they know what it takes to continue to grow their employee team.
Yeah, good point. This is a long-term process. It's not something you go on Monday, go, all right, let's make that shift happen. Yeah.
Hey, I'm curious. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, the research says that it takes somewhere between 3 and 5 years to move somebody from like a mid-level all the way up to the CEO position. And it probably takes somewhere between 1 and 3 years to move somebody from lower level to a mid-level position. So it really is a longer term play. And if you think about doing that across an entire organization, where you want the whole organization to continue to develop their skills and capacity to do good work, then you've got to be focused on that.
Yeah.
We've gone through whether you want to call it the turnover tsunami, the great resignation, whatever. And we see a lot of churn at all levels of organizations. And how has that impacted the succession planning? When you turn around and you go, hey, wait a minute, that guy was here last week. What happened to him? So how does that all play out?
Yeah, I think a lot of the folks that I'm working with, that's really been a significant issue for them from a top level, moving from a successor into the CEO or president role, because many of those are either key employees or family members. And they're probably less likely to leave because they know and understand that they have a shot at being that next president, CEO, or owner, maybe all three. But it really is impacting the mid-level of an organization, because you've got these really strong performers that are looking for more growth opportunities and development. And if the organization doesn't continue to challenge them, well, they're going to go find that challenge somewhere else. Well, we think that most people will leave for more money. I think a lot of times they're not leaving for more money, they're leaving for more opportunity, and they are able to negotiate more money. Yeah. It's not to say that people wouldn't leave for more money, but it's oftentimes, unless they're making substantially more in the new position, it's not the driver, it's a driver.
Good point. Right, so you're the mechanic. You come in and the engine's not running at optimal efficiency, and so you kind of look at this thing and go, "Hey guys, you need to challenge these folks better." Or do you get pushback and say, "Well, how do we do that?" Or I'll hold my nose and do it. How do you get companies from here to here in terms of retaining some of that talent that otherwise they would lose?
Well, I think once they've got succession planning or lost a lot of folks due to the Great Resignation, they're pretty open to the idea of wanting to develop and retain their people. And they understand that not only is developing their people going to be a good retention tool, but it's also going to be really good for the organization. Investing in your own professional development is one of those things that nobody can ever take away from you. And so if the company, I used to have a tagline on my email that said, if you think training your people and having them leave is expensive, try not training them and having them stay. So It's a good investment to develop your people because it's going to make the organization stronger, even if you're not doing succession planning.
Yeah, and I think it can also help to attract new talent to the organization. Absolutely. When Great you have point. You have less turnover, you've got a little more stability, especially in light of what's going on in the job market these days. So a lot of tentacles. Teddy, you had something you wanted to?
Well, I mean, Dean dropped a question that sparked me to think this way. I mean, as an organization is hiring and considering long-term investment for developing, I'm assuming that there is there's a very purposeful amount of assessment to make sure that person I want to develop, son, grandson, or whatever, is going to be the right person to move to that level. Can you speak to that a little bit, Abby? I mean, I know that the general assessments, but there's a lot more than just the general assessments.
Well, and general assessments are great, but they have a limited scope. They don't have all the answers, and what they're assessing to may not be what's most important in any business. So a lot of time what I find is, first of all, most business owners are not interested in going through that kind of an assessment process. They understand the value of it, but it's not going to be comprehensive enough for them to really confirm that the candidate that they have in mind is going to be the best fit. I think what I run into more often is that they have somebody in mind, or they have 2 or 3 candidates in mind. Mm-hmm. And my recommendation is always to invest in developing all of them on a parallel path and be very clear on what you need them to be able to do and what experience and knowledge they need to have to be effective in the role, and then develop them to close those gaps. And if they do that, they're probably going to get a whole lot more out of it than starting with an assessment tool and seeing what those gaps show.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I would also believe that when that business owner or that leader is doing that assessment and evaluation of that other human, that they're following my mantra and they're talking with them about everything just to understand how they think. So,
yeah, ideally that would be the case, but I think sometimes it's difficult. There's a mindset that I think a lot of the baby boomer owners have, that if you follow me around and you watch what I do, then you'll learn what you need to do. And unfortunately, that's not it. It can help somebody understand what it is that needs to happen. So it's maybe a necessary piece, but it's insufficient. So really, it's about going through that gap analysis and figuring out what experiences and what broadening opportunities do you want to enroll them in a way that helps them learn what they need to learn. Yeah. And that to me is the key difference. Everybody indexes to training or coaching, and those are great. I mean, obviously I'm a big fan of coaching and training because I do it, but there is so much more that a business owner can incorporate into that development planning process that will be very, very valuable to their successor.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any mind shift changes or mindset changes over time to be more purposeful in this planning that you coach these organizations on? Are they more receptive to it these days versus, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago?
I do think that they're more receptive to it. I think that the closer that they get to the realization exiting one way or another, because everyone will exit their business one day, the more receptive I think they are to it. But the biggest transition that I've seen is really one that I hadn't predicted. You know, the millennials that are in droves in the workforce now, they have had access to so much technology and at their fingertips for so long that, and they also have recognized the value of bringing in external resources to help them grow and learn, that they have started asking for, and I would argue demanding, the kind of development that they need. And they want to, you know, their tendency is to get what they need for specific things, learn quickly, and then move on to the next opportunity. And so I'm finding in the work that I do that whereas 10 years ago, the business owner was the one that would be reaching out to me for support and help, now it's about a 50-50 split where the successor, oftentimes a millennial, sometimes a Gen X, will contact me and say, help, we need your guidance. Can you talk to us? Can you help us?
Yeah, that's good. Well, earlier, one more point, Randy, Abby, your earlier point about how, you know, don't just follow me to learn reminds me of our guest a couple of weeks ago, Tom Hayes, and his book was Don't Lead by Example.
Love that.
Yeah. Back at you, Randy.
Yeah. So it sounds like now you're getting calls from the people ascending saying, hey, we need help to make sure this thing goes smoothly. So we're seeing a bit of a mind shift, I suppose. I don't know I guess you work at all levels. So entrepreneur to multinational organization. I don't know if you notice, are there any inherent differences based on the size of the organization and maybe what they do or how they do it? Or is a need is a need and it just doesn't matter?
Well, I think there are definitely some big differences in size of the organization. Okay. And there's certainly differences in mindset of the leaders that are involved in it. You know, if there's a leader that doesn't feel like they need the help, then obviously they're not going to go seek it. Yeah. They may not need the help, so that's okay. The biggest distinction that I see is a company that you mentioned multinationals, and I do not work with multinationals. I used to work for a multinational, but the companies that size, they are either going to go with a very high-end, sophisticated company that helps with this kind of stuff at a very mass scale. Their board is going to be much more involved than most of the companies that I would be working with, if my companies even have a board. And I think that the approach that they take is going to be much more focused on a outside search as well as an inside search. And the vast majority of companies that I'm working with are only doing an inside search. They're typically not going out. If they're going to go out and find a successor, they're probably going to sell the company to that person. Gotcha.
By the way, we're talking with Abby Donnelly of Leadership Legacy Group, and we're talking about succession planning. And it's not just for the CEO, C-suite. It's for organizations where you've got middle-level management, senior management. So how are we developing our next set of leaders and be able to move up through the organization? So let's move on to another point that you'd mentioned in your notes here. It's the power of intentional development. And we've touched on that a little bit. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that in a succession situation, the owner of the company needs to be thinking about the development very intentionally and building in those broadening experiences and those learning opportunities. But I think anyone at any level can be thinking about how can I intentionally develop myself? You know, what are some experiences that I can go out and get that will make me stronger and, give me the valuable experience so that I can contribute to either this company, hopefully, or any company down the road. And some examples I think will be near and dear to your heart, Randy.
Okay.
Have been at Goodwill for a long time, but one of the examples of developing yourself that I think can be so powerful and is often overlooked is finding a right fit nonprofit and getting involved at a board level in that nonprofit. Because if you think about what that offers you, especially if you ascend to being the chair of the board, you're in a position where you are influencing people without having any direct, you can't say do it because I pay you.
It's like herding cats.
Exactly. And having to lead a volunteer organization, a different skill set and a different kind of experience that you can then bring some of that into your work in your for-profit company, if that's where your job is. So there's a whole range. On my website, I have a download, it's a free download. I don't collect any information. You can just download it on 30 things you can do to develop your leaders for succession. And it has some examples of that. Some other ones that I really like are when I was at Procter & Gamble, I was in manufacturing and I was an internal consultant for most of my 14 years there. But I'm curious about getting into sales. And so I asked my boss if I would be able to spend a day or two with somebody in sales. And, to their credit as a, developmental organization, they said, absolutely. So I contacted somebody in sales and I spent 2 days going with them to the grocery stores, the drug stores, looking at the product on the shelf and seeing what they did. And it was a fascinating experience. And it taught me that kind of selling was not the kind of selling I wanted to do. So sometimes those role experiences, I call it a day in the life, can be extremely valuable opportunities to learn something that you just wouldn't get exposed to otherwise, or you can do it with your internal customers, external customers, vendors, things like that.
Yeah, and that's you were in a good spot with P&G that they gave you the latitude to do that. Now it's do more with less, and if you take time away from that, where else are we going to be hurting? And so it's a mindset kind of a thing. And I don't know if you're seeing any shift in that to do more of the what I'll call cross training and really just helping the person grow and develop. Are you seeing a shift with that?
I am seeing a lot of that. I think there's a lot of recognition now that the more cross training and the more support that we give our employees, it gets at retention, but it also, I think, makes a stronger workforce no matter what. And so I'm excited to see more of that happening.
Yeah. When I joined Goodwill years ago, a long time ago, one of the fun things that I got to do was to tour the company and talk to not everybody in the company, but virtually every department. Got to go to all the different stores, the different career connection facilities, and talk to people. And it was eye-opening. And in fact, Goodwill has a shirt that says, "I had no idea." Literally, we have a shirt that says, "I had no idea," because it's so true. There's so much that goes on at Goodwill, and I'm sure at other organizations, that you may only have this bit of knowledge, but as you can expand that, you can do one of two things. And I think you alluded to that. One is you can check the box and say, "Oh, heck no, I don't want to do that." But you may find something that you hadn't considered. And you say, "I'd like to do more with that." So whether you do it as part of working for Goodwill, or you say, "Nope, I've got my day job. Maybe I go volunteer. I do something that fuels that passion, and I keep my day job." So again, it's a big world, right? So I guess you get people that take on that side gig just really to have that passion alive.
Well, I think it's, certainly it can be for the passion, but I think from the context that we're talking about today in terms of, daisy chain development, it's really giving them good experience that they can then funnel into the job that they're in. And, when I was at P&G, one of the other things that we did that I take now to client opportunities is if you are working immersed in a business, the better you understand the roles and responsibilities and what it takes to do the people's jobs that you work closely with, the more effectively you be able to deliver them or receive from them the information that you need to do your job, the better team member you're going to be. So I think even doing that kind of a day in the life with a colleague can be extremely valuable, because you see the world through their lens, which helps you do a better job, which helps the company be more successful.
Mm-hmm. We've got, unless Teddy, you have something, we're going to transition to another topic that will probably bleed over beyond the midway break. So Teddy, you guide us on when we want to take our halfway break. But
yeah, well, let's do that now. It's not so early. I mean, it's important to keep the conversation going. It's also important to be grateful for those who are helping us make this happen. Randy wouldn't be getting that fictitious paycheck if we didn't have support.
How many zeros is on that paycheck, Teddy?
A whole bunch of them, buddy.
I'm talking to the left of the decimal point, not to the right. I'm just saying how many zeros are to the left.
They're all zeros. So anyway, Abby, this is good conversation. I love getting together with you because I always pick up a new idea, a new thought. And so thank you. And we got a lot more to talk about, but let's thank our sponsor, Blackwell Captive Solutions. We've known them for a long time. They've been involved in health insurance business for 25 years. Their medical stop loss captive is easy to implement for corporations of lots of different sizes. It works like a shock absorber against those high dollar claims. It can be so critical to an organization and their success. So reach out to blackwellcaptive.com, blackwellcaptive.com. And if you talk to anybody there, you must let them know that Teddy said it would be a great conversation. Back at you, Randy.
All right. So we're going to dive into development of methodologies for all levels. I don't know how we're going to unpack all that in the next half hour, but we're going to take a stab at it. I guess first I have to ask, are there differences between, and I assume there are, between the C-level and, hey, I need a mid-level manager to take over when I get promoted? So I'm assuming there are nuances, differences. So let's unpack some of that. Let's take this any way you want to take it, Ab. Yeah.
Well, we have touched on this a little bit already. These are some of the methodologies, like the day in the life and some of those kinds of things. That list of 30 things you can do to develop your successor will help with some other ideas that anyone listening can do internally. You alluded, Randy, to the idea that, well, Procter & Gamble was really great at doing this. And I would recommend that anybody that is interested in developing themselves, certainly having a conversation with your boss about where you want to go in your career and what kind of development opportunities could be useful for you is a really good place to start. And hopefully they'll be interested in partnering with you to figure out what those are and free you up, because any investment that you make in that will likely pay some dividends. But the idea of intentional development and those development opportunities is figuring out what's the best development methodology to get you the experience and the learning that you need to be able to get the results that are ultimately going to come with the new job opportunity, as you go through that daisy chain all the way up to the CEO level.
So is there a list? You mentioned there's 30, but I mean, are there certain checklists that you're going to want to make sure that these folks have and essentially check the box, almost like the report card that says, okay, you've accomplished this, accomplished that? Is it that, I'll say, basic?
Well, I definitely recommend something along those lines for succession to CEO role, because the stakes are very high. You're putting somebody in the lead position. Yeah. So looking at successor readiness and kind of a successor readiness checklist, like have you done everything and learned everything and able to deliver everything that you need to deliver in order for me to have confidence as the CEO, me to have confidence that you can step into this role. And, the tricky part is that whoever is going to step in behind you, whether you're stepping into the CEO role or you're stepping into, a mid-level position, whoever's going to step in behind you is not going to do it exactly like you. And they will never do it exactly like you. And so part of the process is, what do they need to do so that you have enough confidence that they will do well? And then where do they need to do it more like you? And where can they do it their own way? And I think the more that they can do it effectively in their own way, the better it's going to be for the company and for the people involved.
When you Yeah, Teddy, what you got?
Two things. I shared Abby's 30 things you can do to develop your leaders for succession. I shared that PDF in the chat for anybody who wants to grab that. But Abby, I know we're going to talk a little bit about generational shifts in our leaders and our succession plan. And I can absolutely see that the generation behind me and the 2 generations behind them are definitely not going to run a business the same way as a leader. And the challenge is getting that leader to understand that, using that different tool or using that different process not only is not a bad thing, but could be a good thing.
Exactly. And, technology has been one of those leading edge kinds of things where those generations are very different. And we could probably say the same thing about our generation. I don't know about you, but I'll date myself and say, I'm sure that when I was, I would have been coming up behind somebody in succession planning who was using a typewriter. And I got my first, you go from a regular typewriter to one of those cool electric ones.
Oh, yeah. Remember those days?
IBM Electric.
That's right.
That's right. Right. And then now, it's a computer, and shoot, you can use your little tiny phone now to accomplish far more than we could even do, years ago. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure they looked at us like we were dinosaurs, and, we had to make those adjustments, and so do they. So,
and I think it's even more than that, Abby, and I'm sure you've experienced it. That even their philosophies about how to engage, their philosophies about how to lead, their mannerisms, their styles, sans technology. I think I'm saying that right. I think that my grandkids do not start a conversation the way I start a conversation, and they're on the brink of being business leaders.
Yep, that's right.
Scary, isn't it? Wow. Yeah, time flies.
Exciting.
Yeah. Did I really date myself just now?
Well, yeah, and we always hear and say it. If you don't change as a business, you're going to die. Just take a look around at, you name it, Blockbuster and however many other ones. If you don't keep up with what's happening, all right. So let's say Teddy is lining up a succession plan at his multi-million-dollar in his mind emporium over there. And, in a moment of weakness, he determines that I am going to be his successor. Okay. You with me, Teddy?
I'm telling you, man, I got to stop drinking.
Go with me. Okay. So I'm going to get to a point here, and I'm going to be serious for a second after I fiddle here a moment. So now I have ascended to the throne of the mega grand poobah of Burriss Consulting Global. Okay. So that's me. But now, the emperor has no clothes. All right. So now you go, holy cow, I can't believe we promoted this guy. This guy is a train wreck, or not bad, but how do we go back in when, let's say, an error in we'll be kind. An error in judgment has happened and somebody has been promoted. And now that they're in that seat, they're not performing as we had anticipated. What do you do now,
Coach?
Hey,
Abby, before you answer that, let me tell you a real life story, and I'll tell it to you very quickly.
Okay.
Real life story. I won't tell you the name of the company or the individuals involved, but I did that. I hired a guy who I thought was going to run a huge division of an organization I was involved in. Everybody signed off on this guy being the right pick for lots of reasons that in hindsight, we should not have been the priority reasons. He shows up and he turns out to be less than professional in lots of different ways. And the people I was working with told me, fix it. And I know them enough to know fix it means I have 2 shots at fixing it. Shot number 1 didn't work. Shot number 2 didn't work over a 6-month period. Whatever the actions we put in place to fix it. Tactic number 1, tactic number 2 didn't work. And then I knew the right thing to do. And the right thing to do was to remove this person from the company. That's painful in lots of ways. Go with that, with what Randy asked. How do we deal with that?
Well, I mean, I think you stated it really well, that it's painful if, you've got to remove somebody, and that may be ultimately what the decision is. But I think to answer Randy's question before you get there, I think, first of all, I was going to say that if you are the CEO of a multinational company, Burriss Incorporated, or Burriss Consulting Incorporated, then what you probably have seen in the press a lot recently is that if the CEO isn't working out, they're bringing back the last CEO, the most recent CEO. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but it might be a very good, effective stopgap measure. It's not going to be the right long-term solution.
Didn't Apple do that? Was it Apple that did that?
I don't think it was Apple. I know that Disney is doing that right now, and there are a handful of others. Starbucks did that a number of years ago. Yeah, Apple did do that a long time ago.
Yeah, it was 10 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right. I was thinking more recently with Tim Cook, but no. So from my perspective, the kinds of things that I think can really help, especially if your objective is to help that person be successful, which I think should be the primary objective, unless they're doing something that is, illegal or going to harm the company. But I think it's about surrounding them with support, figuring out where those rough edges are, figuring out where the gaps are, and then putting people in positions on the leadership team, and working with a coach. I've certainly worked with plenty of people that not where they've said, "Oh crap, what have we done?" but more where they've said, "We really need to support this person," and making sure that they've got a coach, because being a CEO is very lonely. There's really nobody that you can talk to, and that's why I think coaching can be so helpful, is because you've got somebody who has a confidential environment, and you can talk to them about anything. And just, even if it's just testing your thinking, sometimes it's even just like talking it through and hearing yourself say and go, "Oh, I don't like that. Let me think about doing it differently." So I think surrounding them with support can be very, very effective. And over time, they're going to ideally learn what they need to learn, and they'll be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Don had a question today. I don't know if you wanted to work that in or.
Well, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, a lot of organizations I don't know that I've seen this myself recently, but then again, I haven't been in all those conversations. But it used to be a rule that at top level or management level, if you leave the company, we're not hiring you, not bringing you back. Are you seeing that being less of an issue? I mean, the organization wants people to grow and then bring in the new thing, the better person.
I do see people being more willing to bring back folks that have worked there before today. And I think it could be in part because of the job market. It's somebody that already has experience in your company can probably hit the ground running a whole lot faster than finding someone new. And the risks. I mean, it's the devil, right?
True.
So I think there's benefit to that. But I do think that there's value in both. Sometimes bringing in some fresh perspective can be exactly what you need.
Yeah. So, yes, too. And I've occasionally encountered this with some of my professional center clients who have been at very senior levels. They don't really necessarily want to be the full-time CEO and take over, but they could entertain being an interim, whether it's executive director or CEO or something like that, to kind of come in and bridge the gap and then walk away. And I don't know if that's something that more and more companies are doing as they really assess. Maybe they don't have the bench strength. Maybe this buys them some time to get it. Pros and cons of bringing in that transitional person.
Yeah, Randy, I think that's a really great point. And I am seeing it more than I used to. My theory on why I'm seeing it more than I used to is because the baby boomers have stayed in the workforce longer than the previous generation. That people would retire at 65 and they'd be gone, partly because they wouldn't live a whole lot longer than that. But today's baby boomers are generally living in very good health. The owners love what they do, and they keep doing it at some capacity. So you think about those boomers, and their children are generally going to be either the tail end of the Gen X, or they're going to be the millennials. And in some cases, they're not quite ready to run business, not because they don't have the same capability as their parents did, But because the business is so much bigger now than when their parents, their father or mother started it. And so they would have to be leading something much more substantial. And they need some additional development and maturity and experience to be in a position to fully run it. So an interim can provide that development hands-on every day, where their sole job is to make sure that the successor is ready in 1 year, 2 years, whatever, 5 years. And that's all they're there for. Of course, you want to keep the business growing and profitable, all that too, but their primary objective is to help that successor be effective when the time is right.
There's another piece of that, bringing in that interim that comes into play, and we're seeing this grow over the last 5 or 6, maybe 10 years. And that is fractional CEO, fractional CFO, fractional CMO. I mean, we have all of these, this intelligence, this phenomenal wealth of experience that says, I don't want to work a full-time job anymore. And organizations, especially medium level organizations, maybe small, they're realizing that is a resource that is well worth tapping into. Are you seeing that, Abby?
Absolutely. It's not only become more popular, but it's become more acceptable.
Yeah.
Investing in somebody that's going to come in once a week or, 2 half days a month or something like that is now much, they're not consultants. They're actual resources that are coming in to do the work hands-on. And I think it expand into, you mentioned a number of them. It's expanding into almost every category now.
Yeah. So
that's interesting. So are you talking about, let's say, our CFO, and we'd have 2 CFOs, they'd be essentially sharing the same job? Is that, from a layman standpoint, is that what we're talking about?
Well, sometimes I see that happen. What I see a lot more, and what I think Teddy is probably referring to is, if you have a company that doesn't need a full-time CFO or doesn't need a full-time, I've seen it, a fractional sales, chief sales revenue officer or something like that, chief marketing. If you don't need a full-time person, then you can hire somebody that will do this on a fractional basis. They're yours.
Okay.
Sometimes they even have an email address with your company name on it that they use when they're, working with you. But they're not on the.
Okay. So that's different from job sharing, where it's a job that 2 people share. This is one person biting off a chunk of what used to be a full-time job, but is not needed to be a full-time job. So thanks for clearing that up, by the way. So yeah, coaching a mistake. So we talked some of that. We've got about my math, Teddy, my phone died, so I'm not able to add and subtract.
We got about 18 minutes left, Randy.
Thank you.
I'm going to get you a battery operated clock to put on your wall.
I have this, right? I have this handy.
Buddy. Abby, you see what I have to work with, huh?
Yeah.
I do. And it's fantastic.
Let me get my manual typewriter out here, Teddy. And you've got one. You used to have one back in before you. Do you have the manual typewriter and
I have a manual
the rotary phone
calculator too?
Yeah. Wow. All right.
Not a slide rule, right?
Abby? Yes, ma'am. I have a slide rule.
So
go ahead. No, that's fine. Yeah, which got?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things that I wanted to share with the audience about deeper than CEO succession. Just a couple of quick ideas, if I can take a few minutes to
Please
talk through that. There are some interesting methodology that I'm including in my new book. I've done quite a bit of research on some of the trends that are happening. Obviously there's a lot of trends that have come out of the Great Resignation and the pandemic. But there are a couple of things I wanted to at least make sure I could put in there that I think could be interesting. One is this tool called a 9-box, and maybe the folks that are listening are familiar with a 9-box, but it's really a very simple tool to help you identify who has the potential for certain roles in the organization. And the way a 9-box works is, think about a tic-tac-toe board. And on one axis, you've got potential. And so you've got high potential, medium potential, low potential. And then on the other axis, you've got performance. So you've got high performance, medium performance, and poor performance. And basically, you're looking at the intersection of both of those things. And so if you think about the top right corner, that's high potential, high performance. And that person is going to be somebody that's got huge growth potential. So you want to really invest in them, develop them, because they're a rock star and they're going to continue to grow and be a rock star. Somebody that has high performance but low potential is probably doing an exceptional work in the role that they're in. And you just want to keep them happy because they're doing a great job. They contribute mightily to the organization, but they're not interested or maybe capable of taking on more responsibility, at least not substantially more. If you think about who's going to be in the other quadrant, that would be someone that has high potential but low performance. So they're not performing very well. Maybe it's because they're in a job that just doesn't fit them. Maybe it's because they're bored with their mind because they don't have a chance to do anything interesting. And so if you can move them into a job that's a better fit, then they can possibly be very strong. And then if you have somebody in that low corner, I got to ask you, why are they still there? You know,
don't give Burriss any ideas. I'm just don't give me any ideas.
But
look,
Abby, that's a good point. I've heard of the 9 box before. I've heard of this metric, and there's nothing wrong with someone not being in the upper right hand corner.
Right.
Absolutely. And even those middle 4 boxes, medium, those are great places to be. Any box is not bad. It just may not be good for your organization. Even the low is not bad. They're just probably not a fit.
Yeah. And the challenge is for organizations to realize or to discover, why is Randy in this spot and what can we do to move him that would make Randy feel better and perform better and make our company better?
That's it. That's exactly it.
Thank you, Abby. I appreciate that guidance.
Yeah.
I look at it and I've worked with folks for a number of years. There's the how-to and the want-to. And,
yes,
you can look at it that way. And if you got the want-to, I can teach some of the how-to. If you don't have the want-to,
And just because someone doesn't have the want-to doesn't mean that they're not the potential to be a good performer.
Yep.
They just aren't doing it in this role because they don't want to be at this company or they don't want to do this kind of work.
I worked with a company in New Jersey years ago that we had a lady who did payroll, and that's all she ever wanted to do. But she did payroll right every single time. 20 some years she's in that role. She's probably retired now, but everybody knew that she was in a role where she excelled because her mission every week was to make sure the paychecks got to everybody across the country. Nobody ever thought about moving her from that role. Yet there was another lady who was in another accounting role who really loved humans and loved to engage with people. So they gave her a sales role, put her in a sales role and let her go experiment with that. Turns out she wasn't good as a salesperson, but she was good with humans. So they brought her back into accounting and gave her a slightly different role in accounting. Organizations need to take and consider those ideas, and some of them struggle with that.
Yeah.
There's a term out there, I think, because I'm a hipster, Teddy. It's quiet hiring. Right.
I've heard about that, Randy. Yeah. So who told you I was hiring a replacement for you?
Well, for the unwashed out there, but quiet quitting, where I kind of mentally went brain dead on you, and I'm going through the motions, burnout, whatever. But and maybe I'm wrong here, but the quiet hiring is saying, let's look internally and let's keep our folks jazzed here and excited and offer them opportunities from within. Because again, you may have a real crown jewel, but just in the wrong job, like the lady in payroll or accounting, whatever. So that's a new term. Just because I'm on the leading cusp over here, Teddy,
Randy, that's why I hang out with you, so I can learn from you, big guy, every day.
Big dollars over here. We got about 10 minutes left. So we touched on pretty much everything. You mentioned role analysis and filling gaps with high potential. So you kind of touched on that, I think. Anything else you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's one other thing that I was going to mention, and minute that we have is, this concept of talent pools and flowing to work. There's a great potential that companies have to really understand kind of do a talent assessment of who they've got and what talent they have.
Mhm.
Even some of the talent that's not used in their business today could be valuable to know. When I was at Procter & Gamble, we did some talent pool kind of stuff and understood what skills and experience and education people had that we could tap into. And if you understand what skills, experience, and education your folks have, then when opportunities or needs come up in the workplace, you can do a flow to the work model where you just tap somebody and say, hey, Abby, I need you for the next week or two to work on this special project. And of course, you've got to get the boss's permission to free that person up. But if the leadership is aligned on the concept of we're going to allow flow to the work for high priority projects or for crises or something like that, then you can really leverage a much broader resource base than you're thinking. And it gives everybody then a new experience that then serves them. I have the opportunity to flow to the work because I have a master's degree in statistics, and there was a problem that needed some statistical analysis. They pulled me onto this team for 3 weeks. I worked full time on this lab issue that we had. And then I didn't know anything about the lab or chemistry, but lo and behold, a year later, because I did that flow to the work, they came to me and said, would you like to be the plant quality assurance and quality control manager? And I had a little bit of experience in it. So I was able to take on, I had a steep learning curve, but I was able to take on that job. That wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had that talent pool and flow to the work concept.
Yeah. One of the things Teddy?
Yeah, I was going to say, Abby, there's another business practice that a lot of corporations adopt, and that is they'll pay for college as long as it improves that person in that role.
Yeah.
That is such a narrow mindset. Let's pay for professional development, college, master's, whatever, if that will improve that human to be able to do more work in our company. Are you seeing those ideas in where people you're working with?
Well, certainly I happen to work with a really exceptional group of people, clients. And so anyone that's working with me is going to have a mindset where development is a valuable part of the process, because that's what they would be bringing me in for. So I'm not running into a whole lot of people that say, we don't need to invest in that.
Yeah.
Talk about flow to the work. And so again, I'll go back to the quiet quitting and that when COVID hit, I mean, the folks that were left standing, they were doing double time. My work, your work, Teddy's work, and all that, right? And getting an attaboy once in a while, but that there's a lot of that going. It burnout. And so now flow to the work is, hey, I'm hearing that same old tune. You want me to go do this for 2 weeks, but yet I still have to cover my butt on my current job. So let's talk briefly mindset on that thing. How do you sell that to an employee? How do they accommodate that employee who says, but yet the water's leaking over here. I have to pay attention to that. And you want me to go do this? How are we going to work that out?
I think it's the leader's responsibility to get the other work covered. If they want somebody to work full time somewhere else for some period of time because there's a leak over here, then they've got to figure out another way to get that done. I don't think it's reasonable to ask someone to do two full-time jobs.
Yeah. Even 2 half-time jobs or
right.
1.5 jobs. It just creates quality issues and I would say morale issues too. So, but it's tough. I tell you, it's tough all around. And I think we all realize it's tough to find good folks. And anyway, Abby Donnelly's joined us. Abby, appreciate you coming out. You have a quick tip or two or a couple of takeaways. And also let's put a plug in for the book you have out and what you're working on for the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Tip?
So my takeaway tip is, I always believe that it's worth investing in yourself. So taking the opportunity to learn something new, taking the opportunity to, get a new experience, to do something that will expand what you're able to understand, know, learn, do. So I think that would be my biggest tip is just continue to look for opportunities to do that because it'll always serve you well. In terms of the book that's out, so 2017, I published Straight Talk About Planning Your Succession, a primer for CEOs. That's available on Amazon. You've got to, unfortunately, type in the whole name or search for Abby Donnelly if you want to find it. it doesn't pop up when you put Straight Talk in. And then the book I'm working on now, the working title is Insider Secrets, 10 Powerful Principles for Leading Through Succession and Exit. And so the two books are different and they're very complementary, and I'm super excited about both of them, really.
Very cool. And when is the book out?
I put a link to the, and Abby, I always look for the author's name when I'm looking for on Amazon, because I want to see what else you have out there on Amazon. And but I put a link to your current book, and I'll share that on the show notes as well. And I look forward to seeing your new book come out.
So it's a summertime. Where do you talk? Summer, fall?
My target is spring, summer. So
gotcha. Well, good luck. Good luck with that. And again, Abby Donnelly's joined us and talked about succession planning, and not just for the C-suite and business owners, but for all levels of management. And so good ways to strengthen the company. Hey, Teddy, a quick thought, and I've had this going through my mind throughout my career, and when I work with job hunters, and especially kids right out of college. Did I say kids?
You did.
Young professionals right out of college. And the thought was, do I go to work in a small company where I get to do a whole heck of a lot of stuff and wear a lot of hats, or do I go into a big company that has let's say a more structured development program, and pros and cons? And Abby, you can nod your head, or if you want to jump in and say, do this, do that. And for better or worse, I was always with the smaller company where I felt like I could do a whole lot of things at a young age. And I never lived in that other world like you did at P&G. So I don't know that one is better than the other. Any thoughts on pros and cons? Just real quick. Just a thought on that.
Are you asking me or Teddy? I've got thoughts.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there are pros and cons to both of them. I think they can give you super valuable experience. And I would base it more on the standpoint of knowing yourself. So if you think you're going to do really well in a large corporation, or you want to use that large corporate experience to learn the systems and infrastructure and, some rigor that comes in those large corporations, do that. But somebody that is just trying to get a job in a large corporation because it sounds like it's a really cool thing, but really can excel, small companies give you a lot of opportunity and autonomy, and you can learn so much in that kind of an environment because you got to wear so many hats.
Yeah. And one thing we didn't touch on, and we're not going to have time to, is mentoring and identifying a mentor and really latching onto that person or multiple mentors to help guide you and help make good informed choices. So Teddy,
be a good show, Randy. We got to figure that one out, man. We ought to do that.
We ought to. Absolutely. So Teddy, any thoughts here before we
No, I'm with Abby. I'm grateful for our community and for those that you help, Abby, that you're helping them with this work, because most individuals and organizations don't know how to move themselves to that next true level of successful succession planning. So, and thanks a lot for showing up today and sharing with all of us. I appreciate that. I'll do a closing spot, and Randy, you'll do the next week. Thanks to the Blackwell Captive Solutions for being our sponsor of the show. Ownership, peace of mind, price stability. Reach out to Blackwell Captive Solutions. They help with the best practices and resources of not only pursuing reduced claim costs, but putting that shock absorber in space or in place. Randy, who's up next week?
I'll tell you, question for you, Abby. Do you know Leslie Spees by any chance? Ever run across Leslie, career HR person? She's been on our show 3 times. It's made her entire career. I think she's been on 3 times, Teddy. So she's coming back for more punishment. But she has her own consulting firm now for HR. And we're going to talk about an assessment, and maybe you're familiar with this, called the Working Genius. Anyway, so the Working Genius, when I saw the word genius, I said, it's not for us, but we'll take it anyway. And so Teddy and I both took the assessment, but it's designed, and here's why we hope folks will watch. It's not just for leaders who are trying to put together a complementary team, so they're not all identical folks, but also for you as an individual. If you're going about your career development, what are things that exhilarate you, that get you pumped up, and what are things that just drain the heck out of you? And try to figure out what those are. And this assessment can help with that. So we'll talk with Leslie Spees next week. That'll be on Wednesday, the 22nd. 11:55. We hope you'll join us. Teddy, I think I'm done talking.
Good. Abby, again, thank you very much for showing
Thanks,
up. Randy, good seeing you this week.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
All of our audience, we love you and we appreciate you showing up. We'll see you all next week. Take care.
All right, bye. See you now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.